All right, welcome everyone to Office Hours with the Data Superheroes. This is our second month of doing this live event. So I think as I said last month, and I'll say probably every month, as we are live, give us a little bit of grace as we stumble through technology and figure everything out. But want to do some quick introductions and we will jump right in. So I will start. My name is Scott Hild, and I am the Director of Client Development with Right Triangle Consulting. And you may be saying, who the heck is Right Triangle? Well, we are a Snowflake partner, and we are a technology consulting firm. We are 100% focused on data. And what that means for us is cloud data management, data governance, and data engineering. And I am very happy to say that as part of our team, we are fortunate to have two data superheroes as part of our team. And if you're not familiar with the data superhero designation from Snowflake, it's Snowflake recognizes those with deep expertise around Snowflake and also with the ability to interact and give back to the community. And that's really what we want to do with office hours, is make it an interactive, a fun conversation. So let me turn it over. I will let some introductions. First of all, I'll turn it over to Julie Heckman.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Heckman, and I'm the Director of Data Engineering here at Right Triangle. So I love the movement of data, the transformation of data, and figuring out how to orchestrate that and make it as efficient and streamlined as possible. So I'm really excited to be here with you all, and I love talking about all things Python and data, so I'm excited for our chat.
Awesome. And Tim, you want to go next?
Tim Spreitzer. I'm very passionate about Snowflake. My short spiel is, boy, I used to just be a Teradata guy, and back in the day, Teradata was great. The banks, the telcos, everybody used it. It's fast, OLAP. However, Snowflake is just evolutionarily better in everything built natively in the cloud. And once you start learning about Snowflake, that's the future. So I'm just passionate about Snowflake. It makes life so much easier. It gets the platform out of the way so you can build value with your data, and it's not about the grinding and the building and the near zero maintenance is awesome. So anyway, I'm just very passionate about Snowflake, and anything I can do to help clients implement, migrate, improve. That's what we're all about here.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Tim. All right, so what we're going to do, kind of our format for today, we're actually going to start out with talking about what's new in Snowflake, kind of a couple of insights and some news to share that's come up over the last month or so since the last time we were together. So we'll do a what's new in Snowflake, and then we're going to have Julie do a little bit of an overview of Snowpark with Python. What is it? What are we talking about? What are the advantages from a technology standpoint? What are the business values of it? And then we will open it up to Q&A. You'll be able to enter questions into the chat, and we'll be able to display them onto the screen and have a good interactive conversation. So let's jump into the what's new. And I think, Tim, you are going to start and talk about budgets. Hot off the press, right?
Absolutely. It's hard. We talked about it internally. How do you limit to just three of what's new? Snowflake's constantly coming out with so many new features that limiting to three is a challenge. So we picked three, and budgets just recently is out now in preview for folks. And budgets at account level, the first level is account level. It keeps track of your spend. So if you want to, why would you do budgets? Well, you want to keep tabs on how much your spend is. You want to set a budget. What is internal your budget within your enterprise for your Snowflake spend. Are you going to meet it? Are you going over it? Are you going under it? Let's find out before the end of the month, right? So budgets allows you to set an account level budget for monitoring everything in the account. And then after you make the account level budget, you can make custom budgets. So you can make budgets for subgroups of objects. And just to touch real quick, contrast this with resource monitors. Resource monitors are kind of similar because you can create a resource monitor on a virtual warehouse that you created. However, the resource monitor that cannot monitor serverless spend and cloud services. It only is on the virtual warehouse that you created. So budgets does all three: your virtual warehouse, your serverless spend, and your cloud services. And also resource monitors, you can set up triggers that can suspend your warehouse when you reach X amount of spend. So if you want to say you get this much and then you're done for the month, resource monitors can do that. Budgets cannot. Just a quick little contrast between the two.
Awesome. And I'm not sure if we put it in the resources at the end, but I know that you just this week posted a LinkedIn post with a video where you were doing a little bit of show and tell on how to set it up. So I would definitely encourage everyone to check out Tim's post for a little live action on that.
So one way to get there, if you want to see the visual, it's basically a visual of the docs of Snowflake. That's just what I tried to do, so you could see it in action instead of reading it. So if you go to LinkedIn, look me up, go to posts, it'll be the last post, and it's under 2 minutes how to configure budgets.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Tim. All right. So the next one we have, Julie, you want to take Snowflake Native SDK?
Yeah, so SDKs are really exciting, especially for those of you out there who want to build apps. At the last summit, they really did a big push about bringing the applications to the data instead of vice versa. And so this is one of the big initiatives that has been made available now for those people who are really wanting to build apps. SDKs are well known in the software development world. I think it stands for Software Development Kit. And what it does, it basically gives you a template to build an app without having to build it all from scratch. So it's going to basically accelerate your ability to build those Snowflake apps and have them work kind of like right off the bat. So I think this is really cool, and I'm excited to try it out and play around with it.
Awesome. And then one more. I'm going to throw it back over to you, Tim. You want to talk about database roles?
So database roles, it's been out for a little while. I don't remember the date, but that is, it's a role, right? You have your traditional access roles, you have your functional roles, grant access role to a functional role, grant the functional role to a user. Well, database roles behave pretty much the same way, but as it says there, it's all about the database. So it's the securable objects all exist in the database. So you can set whatever you want, read only select on all the objects in the database, and then you can grant that role to a functional role, to a person. So it changes it to the container, so to speak, is the database. So at a database level, if you want to just grant it at the database level instead of the traditional way, that's another option you have.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. And that's kind of as Tim said, there's so many things we could talk about. We wanted to just highlight a few, and certainly those are brand new, hot off the press. But if anybody has any questions about those as well, when we get to the Q&A, I'm happy to jump into some of that as well. So, all right. Well, what we're going to do, I think I would say, to kind of lay the stage a little bit, we're going to let Julie kind of walk through an overview that will probably tee up some questions and get going. So, Julie, have at it.
Yeah. So Snowpark is something that's actually been around in Snowflake for quite a while now. It was initially developed with Java, I think was the first implementation. Then came Scala, and then Python was the most recent release. And in my biased opinion, it's the most popular. And I have a couple of reasons for that, and I'll share them in a minute. But essentially what Snowpark is, it's a set of development libraries and runtimes. Runtimes basically just mean engines in Snowflake, and it allows you to run code, non-SQL code specifically, against the data in Snowflake on Snowflake's compute. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the SDK. Essentially now, instead of taking the data out of the database and having an application process and do your ETL or doing your data engineering work, you're now taking your engineering work and you're shoving it up to Snowflake and allowing it to process it right there using the environment Snowflake has already built. So you're not having to manage containers and without moving the data out of Snowflake.
Awesome.
It might be redundant, but just the governance, the data security, right? Your data never leaves Snowflake. Let's bring the processing to the data instead of the data to the processing. So that just makes life so much easier for data governance. You're secure. You've already got that covered because you're in Snowflake. That's big.
Awesome.
So I want to kind of go over two important parts, right? Like, why is it important to us as the technologists? I know it's kind of an antiquated term, but I was trying to think of a good broad term for anybody on the IT side. And then in the next slide, we're going to talk about like, why is it important to the business? So why is it important to the technologists? This to me is a no-brainer, right? Like, I came into data engineering from the MapReduce Hadoop world. So yes, I did stuff with databases, but my first data engineering role was MapReduce queries against massive sets of stock exchange quote files. And so that is not something you could do using raw SQL at that time. There was no way to do it. And so this implementation, if Snowflake had been around with Snowpark at that point in time, we could have written very simple queries and processes with Python to do exactly what we did with MapReduce back then. So you're really, to me, you're unlocking the world of the data. You're not limiting it to SQL anymore. You're bridging those gaps between data engineers, DBAs, analysts. You're now opening up this ecosystem of all these tools. Java, Python, and Scala all are open source. They all have amazing libraries out there to do so much that SQL just doesn't have the capability to do right now, and maybe shouldn't have the capability to do. So it really helps broaden the ability for what can be done in Snowflake. And then Tim's point right there is that, again, you're saving money, right? You're reducing the data transfer, so your processes are much more efficient and you can focus on the logic instead of the network traffic or the speed or any of that stuff.
Awesome.
So the business value, this is really what's important, right? Because if the business doesn't make money, then as technologists, we don't get paid, and therefore we don't get to do all this cool stuff. So as Scott always likes to say, you always have to bring it back around to the business value. So that's why I created this slide. And the first thing is it reduces the expense of the data transfer. And that expense is both in time to develop, time for the data to arrive, network time, and money. Because we know that egress charges do cost. So if you're in one cloud, you're bringing it down locally. If you're in one cloud, transferring to another cloud, that all takes time and money. It reduces the expense to manage a complex parallel processing platform independently. So no longer do you have to manage a Hadoop cluster in AWS. You don't have to manage a Hadoop cluster on-prem. Your Hadoop cluster or your parallel processing environment is in Snowflake. That cost is all wrapped up in your warehousing costs and your cloud services and your serverless costs. It's one cost. You don't have to have separate teams to manage the platform of it. It also simplifies the governance model, which is what actually something Tim mentioned earlier. Your data is staying there. The same governance model to access the data will be what your developers use to do their development. So you can actually tell your investors, you can tell anybody that is in compliance, if you're in a regulated industry, that governance is all in one place and you have a really good handle on what that looks like. And then the last thing is kind of what I was talking about, is that the use cases are expanded. So your business can get much more accomplished of what they want by having the ability to use these open source libraries and these things that SQL can't do just off the shelf.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's kind of switch views a little bit. We definitely are ready if people want to start dropping questions into the chat and the Q&A. But while we kind of wait for that to queue up, Tim, maybe I'll just I'll let you do some internal questions to kind of pick Julie's brain a little bit on this.
So Julie, give us some real world examples of how you've used Python and Snowpark in the real world wrangling data.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm on a client right now, a client job, and there are times when it takes me a really long time to do something in SQL, or I'm going to preface this that I cut my teeth writing MapReduce queries, right? So there are times when I think in Python versus thinking in SQL. And there are people that think in SQL versus thinking in Python. So to me, having Python available as a tool for me can sometimes help me double check my SQL and make sure that I'm doing it right. I will also say that I've written some things in Snowpark that have been more operational applications for us. So we're using Snowflake tagging to help us figure out which objects we need to release to the next environment. And so I tried to write it in SQL. It got really cumbersome. I needed to be able to do a whole bunch of little subqueries, put them all together. And it just was becoming really challenging for me to see the results of each subquery when it was all combined together in one giant SQL query. So using Snowpark, I could actually use my Visual Studio Code IDE. I could take the Snowpark API library in Python, and I could write it all out. I could have a line break, so I could see, like, at this step in the code, what does my result say? And then I was able to basically write a small little function that allowed me to say, oh, go get everything that's tagged with this tag, and then pull it down, generate all the definitions, change it to the QA environment, and then shove it back up. So that's something that we've done that's been really powerful. There's another example that I personally haven't done, but the industry that I'm working in right now is healthcare. And HL7 is a healthcare format that's really popular. It's just basically like a type of message, and it's formatted in a certain way so that it's recognized by anyone who receives or consumes it, that it's standardized. And there are Python libraries that can parse this and turn it into JSON so that you can manage it easier in a semi-structured environment. And so that's a really good application, is that you could use these libraries with Snowpark and ingest this HL7 data into a Snowflake database without having to have it leave your environment at all. So I think that's something that has been really cool, and I'm hoping we get the opportunity to play around with.
How do you develop Snowpark Python? Do you do it in the browser, the Snowsite browser UI, like you would SQL?
You definitely can. So there are there's Python worksheets available now. And that came out, gosh, I want to say before Summit, maybe right around Summit. So sometime like June, May. I personally don't find them as easy as developing in an IDE. And the reason for that is that Snowpark for Python in Snowflake is still a stored procedure. So you have to, or an app, right? I'm going to talk more from the stored procedure perspective. So if you want to write a Snowpark stored procedure, you still have to wrap that code in a function call in Snowflake. So if you're writing it on the GUI in the Snowsite, that's what you're doing. You're writing your function, and then you're putting all the code in there, and then you execute that function to test it. If you do it in an IDE, you can actually step through your code almost as if you're just writing a script. And that's where I find super helpful, because when you have an error, you need to know what the value is at that step of the error so that you can trace it back and understand where it was coming, what it was going in, what it, coming out of there. So the answer is yes, but I think the power of it is being able to do it in the IDE and then having that basically push directly to Snowflake without any changes. What you're doing in that IDE can push directly up.
Awesome. So I have a question, and maybe this is a pardon my ignorance, but help me understand what Streamlit is. I hear about Streamlit, but how is that? Educate me.
Streamlit is amazing. Streamlit is basically a way to develop an app in Snowflake. And they now have it natively in there, right? Like they now have the ability to run your own Streamlit app directly on Snowflake. However, before that, basically what you did is Streamlit is a Python library. Okay, so it's all Python under the covers.
Okay.
And what you do is you run your own little Streamlit server on your local machine, and then all the code is done in Python, and it builds the GUI for you of your app, and then does all the backend interaction. So it's kind of like a little self-contained app that you write just with Python, and it has predefined functions and libraries to create charts or to create inputs or to do calculations. And so the integration between Streamlit and Snowflake now is that they have brought the Streamlit server, essentially the Streamlit Python packages, directly into Snowflake, and you can code a Streamlit app directly on Snowsite now, which is really powerful. And then that is an app that if you choose to, you can deploy to the Snowflake marketplace, and other people can use that app either for free or it could be paid, but they can then deploy that app in their Snowflake environment and use it for whatever purposes it was built. I know, for example, there's some great apps out there for like monitoring your Snowflake environment and for getting metrics about optimization and performance. I'm sure there's some very specific apps, maybe related to healthcare data or related to like retail data that are out there that have been created in Streamlit. I personally created a little Streamlit app back when it first came out because I was just interested in testing it. I dumped all the Snowflake talks for Summit this year and then put them in the app. I wrote a little app so I could see kind of as a giant schedule of what was happening when, because I didn't really like the one that was published. But it's a very low barrier to entry to creating a small application that uses the data. So it's that concept of bringing the application to the data platform.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have a question. How do you deploy Snowpark Python? How is it different than deploying SQL?
This is where it's really cool, because to deploy Snowpark Python, it's really, really simple. I think sometimes when the difference between like app development or software development and data development is that deploying SQL is just running SQL, right? Like if you need a new function or a new stored procedure, it's a SQL statement that you run. To deploy an application or software, you have to make sure your environment is set up correctly. You have to make sure the paths are set up correctly. It can kind of become cumbersome unless you have a good deployment system. Well, the way that Snowflake has built their Snowpark environment is, again, it's just a function. So you essentially write a function or a procedure definition statement, just like you'd write one in SQL, and you define it as a Python or Java or whatever runtime you're using, Scala function, and then you put your Snowflake or your Python files in an internal stage. So that's like basically your code repository. You push them up there, and now you can even drag and drop them in Snowsite. So it's super easy, or you can use the command line to push them up. And then your Snowpark function has a references section where you just say, hey, these are the files I'm going to reference. And then in the main definition of the Snowpark function, you basically put the function name from your Python script that you want to call when the function runs. So it's really no different. And I think it's a great way for someone who's looking to start running Python and playing with it to be able to do it with a super low barrier to entry. It's pretty fantastic. And there's some great ways to do CI/CD with it. You can definitely use like GitHub or any of the like Circle CI, any of those tools that do automatic deployment. And you can build stuff so that, when you deploy it to Git, it could automatically just shove it up to your Snowflake environment and run the SQL definition. That's kind of what I've done with some of the Snowpark Python procedures that we're doing at my client. We have a little repo that when we change something in it, we do it, and then we manually click a button to deploy it, just because we're not doing anything automated there. But the manually clicking of the button, does all those steps, pushes the Python files up, runs the SQL code, and then it's ready to go in the environment. And the great thing about this is that for someone who's running the stored procedure, it runs no different than a SQL stored procedure in Snowflake. So we have some QA code that we've written that runs some automatic QA tests, and our QA developer has no knowledge of Python. They don't know anything about Python. All they have to do is run the function and tell it what tests they want to run and what tables or whatever, and then they call that function just like calling a SQL function. So that's one of the things I really love about it. I love that it closes that so anybody can run this stuff in SQL as long as it's been set up correctly.
What are some constraints or limitations of Python within the Snowflake compared to Python outside the Snowflake? What can't you do in Snowflake with Python that you can do outside of Snowflake with Python?
That is a great question. So depending on how familiar you are with the Python world, people tend to call it the Wild West. Anyone can build a Python package. Anyone can publish a package to PyPy, which is kind of one of the biggest. There's a couple different repositories where you can publish Python packages, and PyPy is fairly large. It is a user risk assumption when you use a Python package. It is up to you to run security on it to make sure that it meets your security protocols. So it's great in one way, right? Because anything goes, but in the other way, you own the risk of it. So and when Snowpark for Python first came out, they had a very limited set of libraries that they allowed to be used on the Snowflake environment, because Snowflake assumes the risk for the environment, right? And so they had Pandas, which is a very popular data science library. They had probably PyTorch, a couple of other very popular data processing libraries. And when you deploy anything new, of course, what happens is people say, well, that's great, but I want more. I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And they all need all their own libraries and stuff. So Snowflake actually partnered with Anaconda, which is another package repository company, I guess. And so Anaconda now provides a whole host of libraries. And there's a whole list on the Snowflake Python website that kind of shows all the libraries available. It is not everything. If it is some obscure libraries, sometimes even some of the more mainstream but less vetted libraries are not available. And that's because Snowflake is walking this line of they want to make sure that their environment is secure and still has the governance capabilities. And so they have to do some sort of vetting with the packages to make sure that they're not going to do anything crazy to their systems. So Anaconda does really open up the world of what you're allowed to do, but there are still constraints. Now, with the advent of the container services on Snowflake, that's really where you get kind of the whatever you want to do. I have not dove into that as much, but I think that was part of the solution that Snowflake came up with in terms of trying to allow people to do more of what they wanted. Personally, I haven't found a need to do anything other than what is on the Anaconda system or what is provided by Anaconda. But that's not saying I won't in the future. So they recently came out with, at one point, their Python version was pegged to I want to say 3.8, and you could only use Python 3.8. And that was a huge limitation because Python's now at 3.12 maybe. But since Summit, they've come out with updated versions of Python to be able to use on their platform. So
awesome. And we have another question here. I think this goes back to what we were talking in the what's new. But can I use the new Snowflake budget feature to monitor my Snowpark workloads? And don't just give a yes or no answer. I want a little bit of detail. So
you don't have a choice at the account level. If you have budget set up, it will monitor your Snowpark workloads because it's going to capture any virtual warehouse that you manually created, your serverless spend, and your cloud services. So you don't have a choice. It's going to be monitored. But again, yeah. So yes, you don't have a choice. Turn on budgets. It will be monitored. Absolutely.
there we go. There we go. All right. Well, hopefully we'll have some more questions come in. Julie, I have just another, so many times when I hear Python, I mean, I'm thinking, data science, machine learning, right? Just help me understand. I mean, let's talk about, like those workloads versus, some of the things that you've been talking about. Just kind of, what's that range of Python and Snowpark?
yeah, that's a great question. I think the concept of using Snowpark for AI and ML, that was honestly part of the biggest push to get Python enabled in Snowpark, because you've got all these data scientists out there who are using some of these Python libraries to do their machine learning models, to build their, data sets, to figure out, to experiment. Python is so easy for someone who's in a data science role to get set up on their machine, pull a data chunk down, and then do whatever they need to do it on it. It is hard for them to scale that because they can't pull as much data down locally as they want to. So that's where the data scientists then go, okay, I have this idea, but now I need to run it over a much larger set of data. And they start going, I need to run it. And then you have the people that are, working on the databases and going, well, you can't take data out of my system. And they're like, but you don't have the tools in your system to run the things that I need to run. And so it used to be, that they would take the data out of the database and ship it off to a Spark cluster, maybe running on, a cloud account or something, and then ship it back to the database to get reported out to wherever that business use case was going to be. But now you can actually take all those AI and ML libraries that are so popular in Python, and you can actually run them directly where that data is in that high compute capability. They've actually released Snowpark optimized warehouses now as well, so that you can specifically use a warehouse that is made, that is tuned for processing that kind of workload directly, which I think is really neat. We haven't had a use case to try those out yet, but I think they're really trying to bring those data science and AI workloads directly into Snowflake instead of having those separate environments that is so typical.
Yeah, is that a little bit? I was going to ask kind of where the future is, right? And it sounds like you kind of touched on that a little bit, right? But as we know, it's always Snowflake's always evolving and new features, functionality being added. Any other just kind of insight on where you think this is all going?
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, because at Summit this year, they did announce a large partnership with NVIDIA and some of their LLM models that basically NVIDIA is providing to Snowflake for their customers to use. And these are kind of pre-baked LLM models that are generic. But it's a really good way for people to kind of get their feet wet with LLM and to kind of understand what that means and how to use it in an environment where they're not having to set everything up. So I think in the future with Snowflake and Snowpark specifically, we're going to see more of the model engines moving to the cloud, especially with the container services. And so you'll be able to stop having this segregation of the data, of having to maintain, a data lake here for your data scientists, and then, a warehouse here for your analysts, and then, a different warehouse here because the marketing team decided they didn't like the main data warehouse and they hired someone to create their own. You're going to have this whole ecosystem where your data lake is right here. Then you're going to have this like semi-structured layer where, maybe the data scientists come to, and then they pull a little from the data lake, and then it's just going to build. So then the LLM models and the machine learning models, they'll contribute back to your data warehouse so that then the analysts can use that. I really think you're going to see more of the platform evolve so that it doesn't have to travel as much, right? Like, we're really talking about less travel time, bringing it all together, the computation, the analysis, the modeling, the engines, and the data in one spot.
Great. Tim, what are your thoughts on just kind of the future and just kind of thinking about where it's all going?
Just if you don't already know Python, you need to go out there and learn it, or you're going to be limited in your scope and what you can do at work. SQL's awesome, but Python is part of the future landscape. So it's like, it's SQL and Python, not just, SQLs. You know Python, right? So just a tidbit there. It's probably pretty obvious. Some state, the sun will come up tomorrow morning, but it's out there, right? So.
Yeah, I do think it's important to be able to understand what it looks like and how it works. I think Python probably has one of the lower barriers to entry in terms of learning a development language or a coding language. The great thing about Snowflake is they have some really great quick starts and tutorials out there where it walks you through how to set up a simple Snowpark for Python example. And so I think doing something like that, I probably wouldn't say, oh, just go learn Python, right? Like, don't just go take a Python course. Python is so wide. I mean, it is used for so many things that I think the best thing to do is really use it for the specific use case you need it, right? And then expand. So do the tutorials. Take a look at how to use it. Set up VS Code. Like, I would start with the Snowflake kind of version of Python, like how it's used in Snowflake to start with.
Mm-hmm. I kind of almost want to walk back what I just said a little bit, in the sense of, relational database systems traditionally SQL based. There's SQL, there's NoSQL, there's graph, there's a world out there, right? Other than SQL. I'm just trying to say that the Python functionality gives you ability to do things that you can't do in SQL. So if you don't know Python, you're just going to be limiting yourself in what you can do with the data. And to be current, probably want to learn Python. Otherwise, you won't have all those tools at your disposal. Your workbench is going to be smaller, and you'll just be limited a little bit. And if it's all about bringing value from the data, how do we bring value to the data to help the client, the customer, the end user grow the enterprise, et cetera? So what's a good tool? Python. All right, let's go learn Python. Great. We'll add that to our mix. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we have a question from Kent Graziano. Kent, thanks for joining us today. What other languages can I use in Snowpark?
So you can definitely use Java. I think, don't quote me on this, Java might have been the first. And then came Scala. And Scala is one that purists that code in Spark, Apache Spark, will use. So I think that was primarily why they did Scala next, was that, and Apache Spark is a Java, it uses a Java engine under the hood. So that's why Java came first. And then Scala is very similar to Java, and it's something that Apache Spark users use a lot. And then Python is slower, right? Because it is a scripted language, so it compiles at runtime. So it's not necessarily optimized, but the barrier to entry is so nice. It's so easy. So Python then came afterwards.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, let me see here if we have any other questions. I don't see any more coming in right now, but if anybody has them, put them in, and we may end up wrapping up a few minutes before the hour, but that's totally okay. I know we have a resource slide, and we definitely want to get to that, but I'll maybe ask both of you any final thoughts, tips, tricks, words of wisdom, advice that you would like to give. Julie, I'll let you go first.
I think my advice is just start, right? Just start something, throw something up against the wall, find a really simple use case. I don't know, download your utility bill data for the last year and throw it up in there and see what you can analyze with it. I think a lot of people are scared because it's new, or it's something that they haven't done before. But starting with one of those quick starts from that Snowflake publishes, or those hands-on labs, those are so helpful, and they can really open that barrier to entry for you. And then I feel like once you start finding ways to use it, they just keep coming. You're like, oh, I could do this, and I could do this, and I could do this. So you just kind of got to crack the floodgates a little bit, and then all the things will start happening. There's also a really good community out there for Snowflake, and so there is a Snowflake Slack channel that you can join just for questions, advice, concerns, whatever. The Snowflake user forum is really helpful. There's lots of questions there. And then, good old fashioned Stack Overflow. So, don't be afraid to get in there, start digging around, and see what you can figure out.
All right. And we actually have a follow-up question back to the what other languages can you use in Snowpark. Again, from Kent, can I use any of those to build a containerized service with Snowpark?
That's a great question. And I believe you can. I'm not going to purport to be an expert on container services, as that is something that has been relatively new. So I have not sunk my teeth into those yet, but my gut feeling would be you can use any language in containers because it's a container.
It's a container, yeah.
But I could be wrong. So I stand to be corrected on that. And maybe we'll just report back to you.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, if, maybe Kent stumped a data superhero today. I don't know. I won't say fully, because you were, you answered.
I feel like Kent is the ultimate data superhero.
Right.
So he's kind of like,
right.
If anyone can do that, probably it's going to be him.
Well, the idea isn't that this feels like an exam that you guys take once a month, right? For credibility purposes or something. But, well, great. Well, Tim, do you have any kind of final thoughts, any words of wisdom as that you'd like to share?
Just to follow up on what Julie said, I was going to throw out the quick starts out there, quickstarts.snowflake.com. If you don't have that in your bookmarks, go have a look at that. And then also the Cloud Academy is at cloudacademy.com. That is a great resource for learning about the stuff we've been talking about. And snowflake.com/data-cloud-academy. Another place to go look if you're like, hey, I want to get eyes on, I want to get some hands on, I want to learn this, let's do some tutorials. Those are some additional resources that I highly recommend.
Yeah, awesome. And let's jump over to the resources and maybe some of this stuff that you'd put in there. But Julie, you want to just kind of walk through what these are, and certainly if anyone is interested in getting these resources and the slides that we had today, if you want to just jump in to the chat and let us know, happy to get this to you as well. But Julie, you want to do a quick walkthrough?
Yeah, so the first couple bullet points, these are just Snowflake docs, and this is basically the API developer guide, so all the functionality that's available. And then the developer guide is kind of like how to get set up with like what it means, what are the components, how do they work, all that kind of stuff. The third link there, this is actually another data superhero doing a YouTube tutorial on Snowpark for Python, so I wanted to highlight that. There's a good one here on setting up your development environment. So kind of if you're going to use an IDE, how does that work? What does it look like? And then the last one is just a bunch of different GitHub demos. And this is from Snowflake Labs, which is really cool. So it's basically just a ton of repositories that you can check out or download or clone that allows you to real time, experiment with some of the demos that are out there.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. And tell you what, if you guys are open to taking another question, we do have another one that came in. So
sure,
it's kind of a follow-up, but have you tried the new Copilot interface?
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I have not personally, but I have a friend / coworker who was at the, what was it? It was like an event in New York, and they did a bunch of, really, they talked a lot about the app development. And the demo that happened that he went to, they were using Copilot. And he came back and he was telling me all about it. He's like, oh, we got to try this out. This is so cool. You can basically do all your development right there in Copilot. And so, no, I've not tried it out, but it is at the top of my list because it sounds really cool.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes, I also have not tried it out yet, and it's on the list to play with.
All right. Well, before we go, we did want, actually, we had another, I'm sorry, just some different ways to kind of keep this conversation going. You can visit Right Triangle on LinkedIn. You can visit our website. Definitely connect with both Julie and Tim on LinkedIn, or shoot them an email. We also have an offer that we do, which is just to continue this conversation, a one-on-one with a data superhero. So the idea is, regardless of what you want to talk about, whether it's Snowpark with Python or any other topic around Snowflake, we're always happy to jump on a call and dig into your specific questions, talk about what you have going on in your environment. So scan that QR code, great way to connect with us with that as well. But I think with that, we are coming to a wrap. Julie, Tim, really appreciate you guys jumping on today and really giving a good overview to help us understand Snowpark with Python, both from a little more of the advanced side, but also I really like that we spent some time talking about how you get started, right? And what that means and what step one looks like. So really appreciate it. You guys have a great rest of your day. And we will see you again on Office Hours with the Data Superheroes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Yep. Bye.